Ladies and gentlemen from worlds unknown, welcome to a once-in-a-lifetime spacefaring slug-a-thon where two shows venture into unfamiliar territory. In this corner, just as early to Halloween as we ourselves, the Angry Beavers, and the challenger, trick-or-treating and history-repeating Alien Nation. Find out who's the heavyweight of horror on Put Up Your Spout.
This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horror, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jeff, repping the 80s.
I'm Ryan, repping those 90s.
We're back with another pair of Halloween episodes. We're continue threeing our way towards the big day. This week's theme?
Aliens?
I was also going to say it with a question mark.
Considering we were doing aliens, I had to find that, and I had to find 90s, and eventually I settled on Angry Beavers, a Halloween episode featuring an alien, so it's as close as I could get. Now, I definitely watched Angry Beavers as a youth, but I don't know if I was a regular watcher. I don't remember anything about it. Except now having rewatched, it represents one of my pet peeves in animation, which continued on from here. The super coked up main characters who are just acting crazy for crazy's sake. In fact, when I was pitching cartoon shows to Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, I lamented the idea that all their characters were just ridiculous, crazy pantses. And my characters aren't like that. They're in fact fairly subdued, so I tried to create a character like that and also failed. So I guess I don't have a leg to stand on.
Do you think the worm has turned and there's more stuff like Steven Universe or Over the Garden Wall that's a little slower, more subdued?
Over the Garden Wall is the only one that I was thinking of that bucked that trend and was super subdued. I don't know. I don't watch enough cartoons anymore to really know if the characters are still super coked up or not.
Is there an Angry Beavers theme song?
Here it is. My episode is the night the Earth went totally crazy, or something like that. Daggett and Norbert are the Angry Beavers, and they're trick-or-treating on the day before Halloween because they think there will be more candy for the taking when there's no competition. So they go and drive some man crazy, and he is taken away on a stretcher.
Oh, really? They were beavers tricking-or-treating on the wrong day.
I don't know which ones are which. I think Daggett is the toe one. He's like dressed in a toe costume, and I was like, is this like a dick and balls joke? But I guess he's actually, because he's got like a scrotum attached to the back of his toe costume.
One of the beavers was dressed as a crawling spleen.
He's a crawling spleen, it turns out, which is a character from a movie starring their favorite actor, whose name is
Oxnard Montalvo.
And so after the one house, they decide to go to one last house, and it turns out it's Oxnard Montalvo's house. Unbeknownst to the Angry Beavers, the house was recently beset by an alien meteor, which contained an alien
from another dimension
who possesses the manservant, which gives the manservant the ability to bring all the monster statues from the various Oxnard Montalvo movies to life, because the alien from another dimension eats imagination and thoughts and brain activity.
So a weird thing about this is that Oxnard appears to be some kind of square-jawed stock character from like the Atomic Age, and he has like a nerdy scientist sidekick and an ingenue Girl Friday sidekick. But even though that would be like the movies they made, they also all live together in Oxnard's house doing real science and like making crazy inventions. And this is my first episode of Angry Beavers, so I don't know if Oxnard is in other episodes or if it was just the reality bending effect of the extra dimensional alien that made them into the characters from the movies, or if they normally just live together doing weird science stuff.
I wouldn't be surprised if this was the only appearance of Oxnard Montalvo. Also should be noted that this was a 30-minute, technically, episode, whereas normally they're 11-minute. This is an 11-minute show, so this is like a two-parter. I'll be brief. Like, the monsters all come to life. The Beavers are trying to get Oxnard Montalvo's autograph and some sweet candy. The monsters attack them, and the scientist is like trying to invent something to stop them, and Oxnard Montalvo is like a big dumb idiot, which is kind of funny. Like, I will say there are a lot of good gags in this episode. The girl Friday is like constantly running into walls.
Oh! My ankle! Let's go! Oh! My other ankle! Oh! Both my ankles!
Why don't we just cut the darn things off?
The angry beavers get stuck under a giant golem statue, and they use their beaver powers to chew it to pieces, thus escaping. Meanwhile, the alien from another dimension is getting stronger and stronger and stronger off of their brainwaves, and he becomes like a big giant Pennywise spider thing. And then there's like a sequence where all the monsters attack, and they're cool monsters. There's like a pumpkinhead one, and like a mummy, and some Dracularns, and some spiders. Oxnard Montalvo is trying to fight them off, and he like picks up an entire bookcase and chucks it at the monsters, but then it accidentally crushes the girl Friday, which was pretty funny.
There was a funny little beat where he picks up the bookcase overhead, and all the books fall onto his head. Everything he does absolutely backfires, or he misses every attack, most of them landing on his girl Friday.
And then there's a part where the alien from another dimension sucks all the color out of the world, except for the angry beavers. But then it cuts to Oxnard Montalvo getting all his color sucked away, and the lamp behind him is just whomping him in the head. Which was funny, made me chuckle. I don't know, it's like, yeah, it's like, it's just gag driven. It's like a good kind of a good send up for a children's cartoon show of a 50s horror sci-fi, movie.
I could believe that these are normally 11-minute episodes because there was maybe 11 minutes of plot in this 30-minute show.
The scientist cooks up some gadget, and it's like a brain malignifier, and they're about to fire it at the manservant, but instead Oxnard Montalvo throws it at him and bonks him in the head, and then it cures him and turns him back into a regular manservant. But then the whole house collapses, and the beavers are stuck in the basement with the alien from another dimension, and then they just run around whomping monsters with the brain magnifier, and then it beats them all, and then they stick the brain magnifier into the alien's slot because he's become like a weird VCR spider, and it defeats him. And the whole world turns back into color, and then the Navy calls off its jets, and the beavers go about their business. The end.
So this was like a weird mashup of like Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Ren and Stimpy, and maybe even Pete and Pete. Like they cut in like stock footage of like dogfights and different armies from around the world and indigenous tribes, and like they just were just throwing everything against the wall.
Probably also super coked up, everyone who made this.
Can we go now?
Let's talk about my episode, Alien Nation, Night of the Scr3ams.
That was the scene in California's Mojave Desert 5 years ago. Our historic first view of the newcomer's ship. Theirs was a slave ship carrying 250,000 beings bred to adapt and labor in any environment. But they've washed ashore on Earth with no way to get back to where they came from. And in the last 5 years, the newcomers have become the latest addition to the population of Los Angeles.
Did you ever see the original Alien Nation movie?
No, I did not. This is my first exposure to Alien Nation.
Wow. So in 1988, they released a sci-fi movie, a sci-fi buddy cop movie called Alien Nation. And James Caan played Sykes, the human detective, and Mandy Patinkin played his alien partner. A year later, they developed this into a TV series. The show only lasted one season, 22 episodes, but it returned for 5 different TV movies. It spawned a comic book, a novelization, and 8 follow-up books. So there was like a ton of Alien Nation stuff. And I've never forgotten this episode. This is the very special Halloween episode of Alien Nation. It really made an impression on me at age 13, man.
You can see the budget and, a little bit didactic, but goddamn, the writing was very sophisticated.
Alien Nation is a very smart show. They do a lot with this buddy cop dynamic, which sort of smuggles in all these other sci-fi tropes about racism and prejudice and assimilation and history.
All this crazy shit that was way ahead of its time.
The episode starts with a couple shopping at a used car lot. The dealer is a newcomer, one of the humanoid aliens that has settled in Los Angeles. And just to paint a picture for anyone who has never seen the show, the newcomers, or the Tentkanese, basically look like Alan Rickman's character in Galaxy Quest. They have big, bald, smooth heads with some colored spots and sort of thin ear slits. Other than that, they look absolutely like regular people. The dealer is a newcomer. He's bragging about all the space in this trunk of this car he's trying to sell. He pops the trunk. There's a dead body. The victim is a newcomer with his hands chopped off. Cut to the police station where Detective Sykes, a hot-headed human cop, and his partner, a newcomer, Detective George Francisco, find out that they've been assigned to a task force to stop this rash of murders. There have already been 3 newcomers found dead with their hands hacked off. Back at the Francisco household, George's wife Susan and daughter Emily are wondering how to carve a pumpkin.
I really don't think you have to wash it.
Well, we always wash vegetables before we serve them in.
We're not gonna eat it.
Then why are we carving it?
Jill said to carve a face in it. It's a Halloween tradition.
Well, now what?
We gut it.
No!
Yeah. We cut it open and rip its insides out. Oh, and you gotta carve a real scary face in it to ward off the demons.
Demons. What is this disgusting tradition?
It's Halloween, Mom.
Emily is excited to go to her first Halloween party. But first, she has to come up with a really scary costume. The detectives go to the coroner's office, where, of course, the medical examiner is delivering exposition while sloppily gnawing through her lunch.
That was a moment.
A little girl, Emily, tells her grandpa about the Halloween party, and he tells her not to go out at all, because it is time for Tag Dot to rise.
No one should leave the house until it passes.
What passes? What are you being so weird about?
In time, you'll learn about Tag Dot Kotahaya. He rises among his people on the 3rd rotation of the equinox, when the paraxial sun is in line.
Neat. And what does he do?
He fills the night with screams. There are many stories about Tag Dot, but only one theme prevails: evilness consumed by madness. His darkness lives in the hearts and minds of all Tengtonese. He was a conqueror with fire in his hands and steel in his heart. He expected adulation, and when our great fathers gave him none, the night broke with their cries as his army spread through the cities, destroying all life in their path. And they were merciless. Hands were severed, and their victims painfully bled to death. Body upon body lined the streets. And he walked among the bodies. Thousands upon thousands of bodies. And he cried. He cried not for what he had done, but because there were no more to destroy. And now is the time for Tag Dot to return and again walk among his people.
I loved this legend.
Dude, that stuck with me for years and years and years. I never forgot. I misremembered it as Tagdar, but I literally never forgot the Tagdars among us. The detectives find another body and a witness who saw a vehicle, giving them their first clue. Later, Sykes' sexy newcomer neighbor has a nightmare about one of the alien overseers on their spaceship, terrorizing her with a bowl of severed hands. It seems that the Tag Dot legend was one of the methods used to keep the slaves under control. George uses the details about this legend to ultimately find the severed hands, and they interview a suspect, Paul Revere, an old man with gross old bones disease. So one of the recurring gags in the show is that they kind of ran out of names for the newcomers because 250,000 people just got dropped off and they had to give identifications and human names. And so all the people you meet, like the janitors named Albert Einstein and stuff like that, like names that have sort of gone out of circulation in human culture, are all just given to the newcomers.
Oh, yeah. There was one in here where I was like, wait a minute, huh? I forget what the name was, though. Oh, it was Jean-Paul Sartre.
Jean-Paul Sartre, yes. So Sykes' sexy neighbor informs him that the Cleason-Soon, the overseers, had a specific tattoo around their wrists. George has already put it together, and he goes off to confront Paul Revere, accusing him of tracking down Cleason-Soon and hacking their hands off in revenge. Paul Revere confesses, but he feels justified because the humans will never understand or punish the Cleason-Soon. George walks away, conflicted. He's starting to recover memories of abuse aboard the slave ship, including children that were ripped away by the overseers. When he gets home, he sees his daughter's Halloween costume. She's drawn Cleason-Soon tattoos around her wrists. George flips out, drags her to the sink, and angrily scrubs away the marks.
Would you say he f***ing freaks out?
George freaks the f*** out, drags her to the sink, and angrily scrubs away the marks. He has a heart-to-heart with Grandpa, who tells him the Tag Dot stories are meant to remind them that hatred and evil lives in everyone, but everyone can also hold themselves to a higher standard. Inspired, George leads the police to Paul Revere's apartment. Paul is gone, but he's left his list of targets. The task force decides to bring them all in to keep them safe, except for a few to use as bait. Sykes and George track Paul Revere to a movie theater and stop him from executing a Cleason-Soon, played by Mitch Pileggi. Did you recognize?
No.
Oh, they get there just in time to stop him, but without a purpose and denied his revenge, Paul throws himself to a painful death on a row of theater seats. It's just awful. He throws himself down an 8-foot drop.
He probably wouldn't have died, really. Although he was old and he had super bone disease.
He had gross old bone disease, and so that couldn't have done him any favors. Overcome with emotion, George thinks about shooting the Cleason-Soon himself. Sykes is up for it, but George wins the inner battle with hatred once more and arrests the former slave master. When the Cleason-Soon mouths off, Sykes busts him in the mouth. Hooray for police brutality! The newcomer George goes home to his wife. The doorbell rings. Who could it be at this time of night? He opens the door, horrified to find a 7-foot-tall figure of Tag Dot looming in a black cloak. Trick or treat, it's just a young newcomer in a Halloween costume. George is overcome by the Halloween spirit, and in a fit of laughter, he gives the kid all their candy. The end.
Yeah, unfortunately they haven't learned about full-size bars yet, but other than that, solid as a rock. The quote-unquote villain of this piece is the old gross bone man who is trying to get revenge on these overseers, and it lends a justification to his crusade. And then the detective, San Francisco, right?
Yep.
San Francisco.
Although he goes by George.
George Francisco is going to arrest him, and he's like, oh shit, you're right, and he lets him go. And I was like, that's where I was like, whoa, this is ahead of its time, because usually in these kind of stories, you're like, there's a black and white right and wrong, and the bad guy gets arrested and goes to jail. But Old Bone Man was right, the state was never going to prosecute these overseers, even though they were 100% identifiable via their tattoos.
So it's an interesting setup because Paul Revere, old gross bone man, was basically a Nazi hunter, and he was hunting down, camp officers, except in this case, the war crimes happened on another planet in another culture before there was a resistance that caused the ship to crash into Earth. And so all of the people came off and entered the city, including the overseers.
It's surprising that they didn't just mob them right there and then. But then you couldn't have episodes.
Exactly. It's hard to imagine that there would be some kind of new Nuremberg trial that the Earthlings would set up in order to prosecute newcomers.
And the cop is conflicted about that because he knows in a way, it's right. And of course, at the end, he arrests the guy and saves the fucking overseer because it was the 80s or 90s or whatever.
It was the 80s.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose even now you would end that story with that sort of moralizing.
I love the grandfather character. The grandfather was saying to George that it doesn't matter. In time, all these overseers are going to die off. It's about winning the battle of hatred in your own heart. But because George is a police officer, he's like, okay, I'm not going to let him get executed, and I'm not going to let him just live in anonymity to live out his days and eventually die off. I'm going to put him in a cell. I'm going to have him face up to his crimes in some form. And I feel like that was a nice between executing him and letting him die off.
But he was just going to let the overseer go.
No, he was there to arrest him.
He was there to arrest Paul Revere.
Oh, you're right.
He was going to let the overseer go, and the overseer begged the police for help when Paul Revere was trying to kill him. And then as soon as Paul Revere jumped off the balcony, the overseer was like, these fucking animals. He instantly reverted back to his disgusting...
They were bred to lick our boots.
Yeah. So, like, he doesn't get any comeuppance except for a punch in the face, which is all we're gonna get. It's like the most we can hope for, I guess.
So, my question to you, and I realize this is absolutely not at all related to the point you're making, and I'm sorry. Are the overseers not genetically engineered to be smarter and stronger?
Well, I don't know. From everything you've told me, they were the original race who then engineered workers.
They are the original race, and the workers are engineered, which means that when Sykes blasts Jean-Paul Sartre, the Clisonsoon, in the face, it hurts him.
Although he could still be more powerful than a human, except that he's knocked out cold.
So, as you know, I've been doing a ton of research into boogeymen from different cultures. One of these things is from Trinidad, and it's called the moon gazer. And the idea is that if you go out and the moon is full, you're going to encounter this terrifying phantom. From what I've read, this was a superstition that was passed on by Dutch slave masters to keep the slaves from taking advantage of the extra light at night and running away during a full moon.
Wow.
And so the idea that the Clisonsoon would use these people's own legends and superstitions against them to try to terrorize them into not rebelling rang true.
You really like Halloween, don't you? Yeah, it's freaky.
Body count for Alienation, I'm going to go with 5. Body count for Angry Beavers.
Just monsters and alien. One alien.
I would say 1 alien because the monsters were inanimate.
Yeah.
And then they were animated and then de-animated. Although you could probably count that as a as a body, right?
That secretary, Lady Friday, is definitely going to die of sepsis at the very least. If indeed she was real.
Scare factor, the tag dot sequence was so epic when I was 13. I don't know if it was scary, but man, it lodged in my brain.
I like the way they shot it too. It was all in black, and yeah, it was cool.
Scare factor for
Angry Beavers didn't have a scare factor. It had a funny factor. That's about it.
Gross factor for Alienation. You had severed hands. You had gross bone disease.
Yeah, pretty gross. Gross bone disease.
Gross.
Yeah.
Gross
Angry Beavers
factor.
had a weird scrotum costume. That's about it.
There was the crawling spleen or the creeping spleen. It was pretty gross. What the factor for Alienation? I'm going to say low to none.
Yeah.
What the factor for Angry Beavers?
Maybe sky high.
Sky high. Theme of aliens. I think I'll give that one to Alienation.
Yeah, I mean, Angry Beavers was pretty alien-y, but like you can't really compete with Alienation on on aliens.
For totally 80s, I didn't really get much of an overly 80s vibe. For hella 90s, I do feel like there was something, at least in like forgive the expression, youth culture of the 90s, that it was in vogue to like parody Atomic Age 50s and 60s stuff.
I guess.
On body count, gross factor, theme, it's Alienation. On what the factor and hella 90s, it's Angry Beavers. But overall, Alienation Night of the Scr3ams is a must watch for everyone.
Now I gotta watch Alien Nation, and it sucks because I just started X-Files, which I don't even really want to finish because it's so quaint by today's standards.
It's got Detective Skinner in it.
You know, at the end of season 1, Scully pulls an alien fetus out of a liquid nitrogen vat, but I bet you when I get into season 2, she's still gonna be like, I don't know, Mulder, I bet there's a reasonable explanation.
The alien object had become a victim of its own story. A story that made absolutely no sense. I mean, for instance, if the alien could bring the monster statues to life through that manservant guy, why did it need the Beavers? I mean, Beavers can't even talk and be... No, forget that. I'm feeling too crawly inside. I'm too sick to think about this story anymore. It's a story so inane and convoluted that even I, the narrator, couldn't make any sense out of it. I have the script. I read it time and time again. Well, all right, I skimmed it on the bus on the way over. But where were the pictures? You can't read without pictures. Pfft, nothing. I should have been asked to be paid off in cash. Get my agent. This is so darn stupid. This is ridiculous. I can't... I know. Send in more planes.
Ryan, hit us with that theme song.
Angry beavers,